Well, hi again. We're on chapter 2 of the book God's Day of Judgment by Doug Vogt, The Real Cause of Global Warming. This chapter, we talked about the last time, the different things that led Doug to the discoveries of this crazy, wild information, which has taken me years just to digest enough to share it. The real message of the Torah is a number system, and we need it desperately today. The measurement of the sacred cubit represents every dimension in Hebrew scripture. It's a measurement that unravels the real message of the Torah, a unit measure, a multiple of a number of years that equals polar reversals, the clock cycle of the universe we live in. The number was 12,068, and today I hope that you'll begin to understand what an important number and how significant the number is for you and I today. My son, if you will receive my words and lay up my commandments, so that you can lean thine ear and attend wisdom, and keep your heart inclined to discernment. Yea, if you call for understanding and lift up thy voice to discernment, if you'll seek her as silver and search her as hidden treasure, then thou shalt understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God, for the Lord giveth wisdom. And out of his mouth cometh knowledge and discernment. He layeth up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to them who walk uprightly and in integrity, that he may guard the paths of justice and preserve the way of the godly ones. Then shall he understand righteousness and justice and equity, yea, every good path. For wisdom shall enter into thy heart, and knowledge shall be pleasant unto thy soul. Discretion shall watch over thee, discernment shall guard thee, to deliver thee from the way of evil. Proverbs 2, 1 through 12. The unit of measure that Doug uncovered in the Torah is a measure used in every dimension of the Hebrew scriptures, which is really exciting stuff. I can't wait to get to that part. The sacred cubit is the basis for our understanding of the number system. And the number system is critical for understanding the real message of the Torah. Doug figured this out. He took 3 expeditions to Mount Sinai. He was raised in, He was raised as a Jewish son and had studied the Torah and read the Bible every year and the whole thing. So he knew exactly, or he had the foundation for everything. He just knew there were secrets. He knew there was more. So when he began to unravel the secret of the measurement of the sacred cubit, all kinds of things started opening up to him. And one by one, the code system came together. The unit of measure is a multiple of the number of years between polar reversals, 12,068. It's presented in the theory of multidimensional reality, but just touched upon here so that you'll understand the significance and power of the number and why and how it was used throughout the Torah. God's unit of measure, the sacred cubit, was the one key that allowed Doug to figure out so many things. He had to make a number of essential discoveries to get to this point. Astronomical discoveries, discoveries about our solar system, but primarily about the clock cycle, which produced the same number, 12,068. I hope you're going to be as amazed as I have been as I've studied this data and reconciled it. It's just been the most mind-blowing experience. I don't want to voyage off. My favorite minister when I was a Christian was Arthur Burt from Wales. He spoke in parables and was really quite the genius. Really anointed. He knew Smith Wigglesworth and had been involved in so many crazy, wild events spiritually. He wrote a book called The Lost Key, and it was so significant to my life. It was pride, that how pride keeps us from knowing and seeing and being and all that kind of stuff. And it was really good. And it had the foundation that pride goeth before destruction. That book keeps coming back to me, and I tried to find it before I wanted to tape this today, but I couldn't put my hands on it. I will find it and share it with you because it's an oldie but a goodie. Truth is universal, applies to all men everywhere, and has to reconcile. It can't be part of creation. You can't have truth and have it be spirit but not science, or vice versa, right? How silly of us to think that we could throw the world out the door and pretend that we didn't carry any responsibility for it, even though we needed to feed our kids, don't we? Yeah. I'm learning spiritual things and faith, and I'm 70 and I studied the Bible for 33 years, but I'm still not to the point where I'm going to wait for someone else to send me some manna to feed my kids. That's where I'm at. All right, so where are we? Okay, one thing that's really important here is that the Egyptian royal cubit is different from the English royal cubit. And Doug had to figure that out too, and he had to discover the measurements of a handbreadth, and you'll see that in a couple minutes. He was able to discover that the total of the chapters and verses in the Torah represented 12,068, or the period of time between pole reversals. Once he did that, once he had that number, all he had to do was figure out what number he had to use to multiply that by to get the root number of 12,068. Does that make sense? It will. It's important to understand the timeline of Doug's discoveries that led him to the conclusion so it'll make sense to you. It took me 3 years to get to the understanding I have today, which is pretty foundational, but I had to go and learn a lot of things, as you'll see, in order to get here. I had a theological background, and I had to relearn some basic sciences just to read the book. It's a shame that we've allowed society through government and religion to separate us the way Plato says that matter and spirit are separate. How silly is that? Like we could pick and choose from creation, right? Okay, so the Hebrew scriptures use the sacred cubit for everything as a unit of measure. There's only one place in the entirety of the Torah that talks about it and describes what it is. That's in Ezekiel. Ezekiel was written by Baruch. In Ezekiel 46, it says, "And in the man's hand, a measuring reed, R-E-E-D, of 6 cubits long by the cubit and a handbreadth." So he measured the breadth of the building 1 reed and the height 1 reed. So we can assume from that the measurement of the sacred cubit is a cubit and a handbreadth, right? So Doug used his hand to begin with, but let me go back a little bit. This is in Ezekiel 46. Recognize the numbers. Don't let that go. The number 40 and the number 6. And then in the next verse that he brings up, where it describes that the handbreadth, etc., is 43:13. So remember these numbers because they're going to start to make a lot more sense to you. So the cubit is a cubit and a handbreadth. The word cubit doesn't show up until chapter 40. Think about that, chapter 40, right? And it's mentioned after chapter 40 92 times. 9 and 2 is 11. So Baruch, through Ezekiel, is the only prophet that mentions it or includes those numbers in the book. When Doug figured this out, he knew he was the first in understanding what the writers of so many of the Hebrew scriptures were trying to convey or hide or communicate in code. The 12,068 number permeates the entire Torah, showing up in Ezekiel just below the surface story by multiplying a measurement by the value of the sacred cubit. Does that make sense? I've got some tables to show you which will bring a lot more clarity to this. And I'll put them up as a PDF in case you want them. Okay, so defining the number 12,068. Everything that I'm going to talk about for the next couple minutes is the same message, all derived from the same number, the root number, which represents the number of years between the polar reversals, or what we call the clock cycle. It's also known as the great year. The Mayan long count is relative. Okay, so all the numbers that were relayed or communicated that Doug found through the codes were multiples or functions. Forgive me, I said all. Many of the numbers were multiples or functions of 12,068. A quarter is 3,017. A half, 6,034. 2 times is 24,136. 3 times is 36,204. And 4 times, which isn't used very much, is 48,272. It's the sequence that counts, not the decimals. So you can ignore the decimal points when you're looking at numbers like that. If the number does not appear after multiplying it times 24,136, you can divide it by 12 and the numbers will start to show up. Sometimes it has to do, well, Doug thinks that the reason that they had to kind of manipulate this 12 is with the 12 tribes of Jacob, sons of Jacob, or the 12 tribes of Israel, because there weren't 12 tribes in the end, right? They kind of stuck in Manasseh and Ephraim in there, and didn't make sense. So much of it doesn't make sense, which reminds me, when I was talking to Doug, he just said, Cindy, I just kept saying to myself, why do they want us to know all these numbers or generations? And it finally started making some sense. Okay, so the number of chapters and verses in the entire collection of books included in the Hebrew Scriptures equals 24,136, or 2 times 12,068. The total number in the chapters and verses in the Torah equals 6,034, or half of the root number. So the number of chapters and verses in the Jewish books, right? Not the Piso written books, the Jewish books from Joshua to 2 Kings, all of the prophets, not Zechariah, but Psalms was included, equals 12,068. And this is in the chart. I'll let you see. The other Jewish book writings, which included Proverbs, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah, and 2 Chronicles, total 3,017, or a quarter of the 12,068 root number. There's a note here that Doug made about the inch. The British inch is what Doug's using in his calculations. This was not created until the end of the 16th century, but it was the measurement that was intended to work because it works perfectly. 1 sacred cubit is equal to 24.136 inches. The British yard wasn't standardized until 1599 during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. During that time, the Jews were allowed to live in England up until 1290, but then King Edward banished them. Some still live there, but they kept a low Christian profile. The Jews brought with them the length of the inch that we use today. Tradition holds that the description of the inches located in the Torah is the correct one. I think that makes sense. Got carried away with myself. I've got notes and I can't read all of them. The English Standard System has a divine origin. That's the point, is that divine system, however it originated, is what works with everything. And, with timelines and chronology of history, we have no clue. So I don't want to get off it because I've got so much info. But at one point I was looking through and comparing and reconciling timelines of history. And there were like 300 years, almost empty pages, which I should not have found, but I did because I was comparing. Yeah, things are not the way they have been shared with us. Okay. Where am I? Okay. So now you understand why Doug uses the standard system in his book. And then Oliver Cromwell, which at one point it looked like I was a direct descendant of him, and Doug and I had a conversation about that. But then I did some more research, and I'm not sure about it. I hope not. But in 1655, he let the Jews back into England. Okay, Moses breaks the 2 tablets. Now, if you think about the story, Moses uses the code system and the number after he came down from Mount Sinai and saw what his brother had done. Remember, his brother Aaron had built a golden calf. And when Moses saw that, he broke the first set of tablets and threatened death for anyone who would worship the golden calf. The exit story says that 3,000 men were put to sword, but not his brother, even though his brother was the one who built the golden calf. Anyway, the 3,000 figure doesn't mean that anyone was killed at all. It represents the Torah, and here's how. If you take 3,000 times the length of the sacred cubit of 24.136 inches, it equals 72,408. If you divide that by 12 for the 12 tribes, 6,034 is the number of chapters and verses in the Torah. Moses was trying to say that he destroyed the Torah tablets. No one was killed, least of all Aaron and his brother, who created the idol, and it doesn't appear that Aaron was ever forced to build it. This number is also telling us that the Torah had a chapter and verse numbering from the very beginning. All this is going to start connecting, trust me. It'll just take some time. I didn't know if I'd ever get it all. Okay, so if you take a Torah number, it usually meant for measurement, and then you multiply it by the length of the sacred cubit. And if the number you're looking for doesn't first appear, then you divide it by 12 for the 12 tribes, and one of the numbers might appear. Because the Torah is a code book, sometimes it won't work because the numbers are used in other coding systems, which is a whole nother deal. So there are 10 codes that I know about: small lettering, large lettering, composite numbers. And I've got all that information to share eventually. But the one code uses 7, 40, 60, 70, and 400. And whenever they talk about those numbers in some of the Torah, they represent other things, not the clock cycle. So what he did, Ezekiel says the sacred cubit is equal to a cubit and a handbreadth. So where am I? I don't know if I'm lost in my notes here. Where are we? Okay, so Ezekiel is talking about the sacred cubit equal to 1 cubit and a handbreadth. The Hebrews said that a cubit upon the Egyptian royalty cubit was 20.67 inches long. When Doug started trying to figure all this out, he used his own hand, which was 3.46 inches, and the resulting value was 24.13. And then he multiplied that value to get the length of the holy place from Ezekiel 45, 2, from Ezekiel 45, 2, which was 500 cubits square. That totaled 12,065. And he just knew that it was so close, 3 off. He just could not figure it out. So he went back to 1989 to his astrological research. He had spent quite a bit of time studying the pyramids before all of this led up. It's kind of like my research. One thing leads to another. It's not even like, absolutely I'm passionate and curious, but one step points me to the next. I can be looking for a book and the next day it's there right in front of me from the weirdest place. And I'm sure that's how it was with Doug, because I do believe that we're supposed to figure this stuff out. We're supposed to be seekers of truth, never to stop, not to get stuck. We never thought about coding, did we? Yeah, because we've been fed some programming for sheep. Okay. So, Doug was trying to figure out where the discrepancy was. So he backed into the length of the sacred cubit by using 12,068, dividing it by 500, which gave him a value of 24.136 inches. How about that? The actual value of the sacred cubit. Crazy. Secret numbers revealed in the Torah and the Hebrew script are just wild. 12,068 years is the cycle or the number of years between cataclysms, between earth ages. How did the Hebrews know? Doesn't that blow your mind? When you look at the stuff they used to know, they were far advanced. We've been sold this line that they were cavemen. And yeah, there were cavemen, but these people we're talking about were highly advanced Bronze Age people. Probably more advanced than you and I. Okay, well, I think I could say that. Okay, so, okay, the next chapter, I guess that's where we're at, will reveal the Torah code system not known since Baruch in 587 BCE. And some of the codes weren't even discovered until Doug did. That's pretty cool. You might be the first person in your crowd. The cataclysm number. By October 1994, Doug had read the Hebrew scriptures so many times, being raised as the Jewish son in the family. He did everything he was required to do and was interested. So he couldn't figure out why had he not noticed the 12,068 number, right? And he noticed that it was a cycle, but he wanted to be sure that he wanted to understand how much the writers actually knew about what they were writing. And it looks as though some did and some didn't. A little bit confusing, and there's no way to really know, but I'll share with you what he figured out. Moses had written a cryptic verse, and that is where Doug found the key. In Deuteronomy 32:7, it says, "Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask the Father, and he will declare unto thee thine elders, and I will tell thee." So Doug began to study Genesis 53 through 32, where the generations of Adams are listed. I think it's 5. I think I wrote it down wrong. Genesis 5, 3 through 32, where the generations of Adam are listed. And the verses give the ages of each man, the age when he had his first son, and the years after the first son. And then they recap the age by totaling the ages so that the ages repeated twice implies that something should be multiplied